Our gurus have traveled to 5 continents, visited hundreds of thousands of homes, and personally counseled millions. Whether through letters, phone calls, or personal meetings, they have guided so many people. People from different countries, different religions, and different cultures. All of that guidance gives the Satpurush an unfathomable source of experience.
બધાને ગાઈડ કરે. કેટલા યુવાનોને સ્વામી જીવન બનાવ્યું છે, કેટલા યુવાનોને સલાહ સૂચના આપીને એનું જીવન ભવ્ય બનાવી દીધું છે. અને બધી રીતે હજારો લોકો એમના યોગમાં આવ્યા છે. એટલે એ રીતે આપણે ગણીએ ને તો એમની સલાહ લેવા જઈએ. કન્સલ્ટન્સી હોય છે ખરું. કોઈ જૂના એન્જિનિયર હોય કે ઇન્કમ ટેક્સ પ્રેક્ટિશનર હોય, આ બધા હોય, એ પોતાનો નોકરી ધંધો મૂકી દે, પછી કન્સલ્ટન્સી શરૂ કરે. એટલે જે એનો સલાહ સૂચન લેવા આવે એના પૈસા લે, પણ એના સલાહ સૂચન કામ કાઢી નાખે. એનો વર્ષોનો અનુભવ છે, નક્કર અનુભવ, કલ્પના નથી. એ તમને જે ગાઈડ કરે કોઈ ના કરી શકે.
What if we can get the essence of all that guidance in one place? Satsang is so vast. However,
આપણે જે બધું સત્સંગ આટલું બધું પોરું મોટું છે, મહારાજના વખતથી લઈને ઠેઠ અત્યાર સુધી, એ બધી એમાં એક બધું ટૂંકમાં આવી જાય છે. એ બધું સંકલ્પ કર્યું છે.
Satsang Diksha is Sriji Maharaj himself directly guiding us through Mahant Swami Maharaj. Crystal clear instructions for every relationship. Our relationship with ourselves, our families, with satsangis, and our relationship with our Guru and God. We can ask all of our questions to Swami Shri, and through Satsang Diksha, he provides us the answers. Satsang Diksha is our personal Goshti with Swami Shri.
Upon the closing of the first Satsang Diksha Parayan given by Mahant Swami himself, he wrote a letter to Santos that said, "I want to give this knowledge to each and every single person one-on-one. I want to do a padramani in their home to teach them this knowledge. However, this is physically not possible. Therefore, I will do it through this scripture. The Satsang Diksha is our one-on-one Goshti with Swami Shri, his padramani in our home." As we begin this 4-week lecture series on our relationships and the guidance that Mahant Swami has given us for them, let us start off with the one relationship that we all have in common, the one with ourselves. When it comes to understanding ourselves and what we want to do, there seems to be many questions rather than answers. Who are we? What are we doing? What are we supposed to do? And how are we supposed to get there? These questions are the basis of philosophy, whether it be Plato or Nachiketa. The questions are the same. The difference, however, is who they're asking. Sriji Maharaj says in Vachanamrut 2:53 that we know nothing about our own selves. He further elaborates and says that the Satpurush knows everything about all the souls in the entire universe. So who better to ask about ourselves than the one person that knows us better than we do? Let's request Pujya Chaitanya Swami to elaborate on this, on what Mahant Swami Maharaj wants us to learn about our relationship with ourselves. Pujya Chaitanya Swami.
શ્રી સ્વામિનારાયણ ભગવાનની જય, અક્ષર પુરુષોત્તમ મહારાજની જય, ગુણાતીતાનંદ સ્વામી મહારાજની જય, પ્રમુખ સ્વામી મહારાજની જય, Mahant Swami Maharaj ni jai. Pramukh Swami Maharaj Shatabdi Mahotsav ni jai. Akshardham Mahotsav ni jai. What would happen if you were dropped in the middle of the Sahara Desert and were told to walk in a perfectly straight line? Would you be able to walk straight ahead? So German scientists have conducted this experiment on many different people throughout the world, and they have concluded that humans cannot walk in a straight line. Without an external frame of reference like the sun or the moon or some landmarks, it is known that no matter how much we try to walk towards our goal, we always end up walking in circles. Without signposts, without markers, without landmarks, we would always be lost. So the three fundamental questions of spatial navigation are this. Where am I? The first question. If we want to navigate through space, the first question that we must answer is, where am I? The second question is, where am I supposed to go? Or the corollary to that question is, where am I going right now? And the third question to navigate through space is, how do I get there? If we cannot answer these three questions, we always get lost. The same kind of analogy can be applied to the spiritual life, to spiritual navigation. What are the three basic questions for spiritual navigation to avoid getting lost? And the three questions are very simple. Who am I? Second question, why am I? And a corollary to that question, where am I meant to go? And the third question is, how do I get there? The three basic questions of spiritual navigation, without which we can never make progress on the spiritual path. So we're very lucky to have Satsang Diksha given by Param Puja Mahant Swami Maharaj, because he has given us landmarks and signposts to answer these three fundamental questions of spiritual navigation, all in one small booklet called Satsang Diksha. In fact, he stresses this very same concept in verse number 145. He says, Antar drashtischa kartavya pratyaham sthir chetasa kim kartum agatosmiha Kim kurveham iheti cha. Meaning, we should introspect every single day in our minds with a composed mind. Why am I here and what am I meant to do? This is the exact same sentiment that has been shared by the entire Guru Parampara. To navigate through the spiritual realm, we have to answer this question. Gunatitanand Swami has said the very same thing in different words in simple Gujarati. Gunatitanand Swami says that નિરંતર સર્વે ક્રિયામાં પાછું વળીને જોવું કે હું શું કરવા આવ્યો છું અને શું થઈ રહ્યું છે. The first question that we have to answer on the spiritual realm is the question, who am I? The answer to this question is very beautifully explained in the Srimad Bhagavat. It is said that when Nilkantvarni traveled through the forest for 7 years, he remembered two examples almost every single day in his mind. One was the example of Bharatji and the other was the example of Puranjan. So the Bhagavat says that once there was a king by the name of Puranjan, which interestingly means one who enjoys in a body. So having departed from the spiritual realm, Puranjan travels with an unknown friend, which the Bhagavat calls Avignata Sakha, an unknown friend. He travels with the unknown friend to the material world. Eventually, Puranjan comes to a city called Naudvarpur, the city with 9 gates. He rules it. Eventually, he finds a woman that he's attracted to and makes her the queen. Her name is Puranjani. Accompanying the queen are 11 bodyguards. So they serve the queen daily and dutifully, and it just so happens that Puranjan always follows the lead of the queen. The Bhagavad says that when the queen drank, Puranjan also drank. When the queen dined, Puranjan also dined. When the queen laughed, Puranjan also laughed. And when the queen lamented, the poor king also lamented. So both enjoy the kingdom very happily, thinking that they will rule it forever. But one day, Naudvarpur is attacked by a king named Chandaveg with his army of 360 soldiers and 350 female companions. So the queen's bodyguards fight valiantly for many years, it is said in the Bhagavad, and Puranjan tries to protect the kingdom that he loves so much, but the battle is ultimately lost. Chandaveg's army takes Puranjan away and burns the entire city, and the queen and the bodyguards. Puranjan forgets his unknown friend who accompanied him all throughout, and he laments losing his queen and his beloved kingdom. This story from the Bhagavad is actually an extremely elaborate and intricate allegory for all of life. The city of 9 gates, Naudvarpur, is the body. The queen is the buddhi. The 11 bodyguards are the 10 senses and the mind. Chandaveg is time, and his 360 male and female companions are day and night. And of course, the main character in the story, Puranjan, is the Atma. Forgetting that he is separate from the body and separate from the city, and he also forgets his unknown friend, Avignata Sakha, who is actually God, who was constantly with him all the time. So, as we can see through the Bhagavad, that ultimately what we have to understand, first of all, is that we are not the body, but we are really the Atma. The first necessity of understanding our spiritual path. That is why Mahant Swami Maharaj says in slok number 8, Satyasya Svatmanaha Sangha, that we should always do Sang, keep the company of Atma, which is the truth. And it is the truth. It may not be apparent, but it is given in all the scriptures that we are not the body, but ultimately, in reality, we are the Atma, thinking we are the body. In verse number 116, Mahant Swami Maharaj writes, just as Sriji Maharaj has written in the Shikshapatri very beautifully, Nijatmanam Brahma Rupam Dehatraya Vilakshanam, that in reality we are separate from the 3 bodies. Imagine a prince that played the role of a beggar in a play. During the play, he plays the role very beautifully, but he forgets in real life that he's actually a prince. What would we think of him? We would think that he made a big mistake, that in reality, he was just playing the role of the beggar. But we make the same mistake in life. Playing the role of the body, we forget that we really the Atma. This is exactly what Sriji Maharaj stressed throughout his life in the Vachanamrut and to the Paramahansas. Once Sriji Maharaj asked the Paramahansas that who is strong and brave like this Atmanand Swami, and the Paramahansas were very bold and brave and courageous. They said to Bhagavan Swaminarayan that, Bhagavan Swaminarayan, we're ready to do whatever you say. If you say, don't eat any food, we'll live without food. If you say, without water, we will live without water. We will stay without blankets, we'll bear the cold, we will not pay any attention to the body. That's what we are ready to do for you. Bhagavan Swaminarayan then said that that's all very good and fine. But ultimately, Bhagavan Swaminarayan said, and this is written in the Bhakta Chintamani very beautifully, Ema bolya jare muni jana, Suni Prabhuji thaya prasanna, Ek vat kahu mano teha, Apane atma nahi deha. So Bhagavan Swaminarayan says that I understand that you're ready to do anything for me. But understand that what I want you to do is to ultimately realize that we are not the body, that in reality we are the Atma. And the most important aspect of this is that the moment we realize that we're the Atma, that is the only way that we'll be eternally happy. otherwise we'll never be ultimately happy. Bhagwan Swaminarayan said this exact same thing in the Vachanamrut Garara section 2 number 51. He said કે જ્યાં સુધી ત્રણ ગુણનો સંગ છે ત્યાં સુધી કોઈ જીવ સુખ્યો ન થાય. As long as we believe ourselves to the body, we'll never be happy. And Bhagwan Swaminarayan also says that we have actually no choice but to believe this. In Sarampur 4, Bhagwan Swaminarayan says કે એક શ્લોકે કરીને કે લાખ શ્લોકે કરીને સમજો પણ ચોખ્ખી સમજણ સુખદાયી છે. Whether we understand this concept through Kathavarta, whether we understand this through conventions or shibirs through NC18 or NC21 or NC24, whether we understand it with one shibir or 100 shibirs or one sabha or million sabhas, Bhagwan Swaminarayan ultimately says that the most important thing that we have to understand is that we are not the body, we are actually the Atma. But just because we believe ourselves to be the Atma doesn't mean that we should neglect the body either. Because Mahant Swami Maharaj says in Satsang Diksha in verse number 2 that the body is actually priceless, it's valuable, it's rare. Durlabho nashwaraschayam varam var na labhyate. That this body is actually durlabh, it's rare, it's valuable, and we don't get it repeatedly. Why is it rare? Because in that same verse, Mahant Swami Maharaj says, Dehoyam sadhana mukter. That if you want to achieve sadhana and achieve mukti, then the body is actually the only tool that will allow us to get us there. So the body is not to be neglected either, because it is a tool. But Mahant Swami Maharaj also stresses in verse number 2, Nashwarascha, that actually the body is nashwant, it is temporary, it can die. And so we have to understand the value of life and time. People have tried throughout history to try to be immortal. People have tried to find the elixir of life. People have tried to become immortal through becoming mummies. People have tried through cryogenics and to slow down the aging process. But the one thing that we've realized through all of time is that death is imminent, it can come to anyone, and it can come at any time. In navigating through spirituality, the first question is, who am I? But the second question is probably even more important. Why am I here? And the corollary to that, where am I supposed to go? It defines the very purpose of existence. Because you see, science can tell us the what of life and the how of life. It can tell us what we are. It can also tell us how we are. But religion tells us why we are, why we're alive. Otherwise, if we cannot answer this question, existence becomes meaningless. Because think about it, what is the difference between the existence of a rock and the existence of us? Without knowing the answer to this question of why am I even alive, our breath simply becomes a tick of a clock. And so we have to answer this question, why am I here? Mahant Swami Maharaj first answers that question by saying, why am I not here? In verse number 2, Mahant Swami Maharaj writes, Na bhoga matra sadhanam, that this body is not just a tool to enjoy life and just to be happy just for the sake of being happy. Eat, drink and be merry is one philosophy of life. It is one way of living life. In the times of Charvak in India, he believed in the same philosophy, enjoy life, and that is the only purpose of life. Modern day Charvak would say, do whatever makes you happy. But ultimately, that is not the purpose of life, because if that was the only purpose of life, then how would we be different from animals? So Mahant Swami writes in verse number 3 that Lokiko Vyavarastu Deha Nirvaha Hetuka, that in life that we have to make sure that we also take care of our body, but the Vyavar, the work that we do in the daily life, it is only necessary to sustain the body and not for extravagance. So the body needs food. Family needs a house. A house needs furniture. Food, family, and house and furniture needs money. And money needs a job. And jobs need a car. And so these are the basic necessities of life to help us live life. But Mahant Swami Maharaj says that everything else is extravagance, and that is not the purpose of human birth. So what is the purpose of human birth? Mahant Swami Maharaj writes an answer to this question very beautifully in verse number 291, in which he has basically given an answer to the very purpose of life. The most important question that we can ask in life, he has given the answer in verse number 291, basically saying that the purpose of life is ultimately mukti and bhakti through absolute purity, meaning through being Aksharup. He writes in verse number 291, Akshara Brahma Sadharmyam Samprapya Dasa Bhavataha Purushottama Bhaktirhi Muktir Atyantiki Mata, meaning that the ultimate goal of life is to become Aksharup and do bhakti to Bhagwan Swaminarayan with Das Bhav. So the question that we would ultimately have to ask is, why does Mahant Swami Maharaj say that we have to become Aksharup and not just Atmarup, as we mentioned previously? Because he does say that in verse number 116, Nijatmanam Brahma Rupam, that it's not just about becoming Atma, it's about believing our Atma to be Brahmarup. The reason for this, first of all, is that becoming Aksharup is actually the pinnacle of the potential in human beings. Some humans live under the influence of baser instincts. They live with anger and jealousy and greed and ego, and these actions and these qualities, these instincts, define their life. And ultimately, you can say that these actions, they're very difficult to differentiate from animals. Some humans go higher than that. They rise to do good things in life. They help each other. They create an environment where goodness propagates. They do charity. But they're still disturbed by the ups and downs of life. They're not perfect. But then some humans, they can rise above those qualities to the pinnacle of the potential in human beings. They remain totally poised in life, completely balanced, totally blissful, and absolutely selfless. And that is why Aksharup is necessary. Aksharup is the pinnacle of the potential in human beings. But secondly, the reason for being Aksharup is the concept of eligibility through purity. Mahant Swami Maharaj often says that what is satsang? He says that satsang is ultimately Shuddhini Parakashta. The pinnacle of purity is satsang. And Bhagwan Swaminarayan has echoed this same sentiment in the Vachanamrit, Ahmedabad 2. Nai dhoine puja karvanu. Bhagwan Swaminarayan says that no matter what we do in life, until we become pure, we can never reach Bhagwan's bhakti ultimately. The same sentiment has been shared in the Gita. Brahma bhuta prasannatma na sochati na kangshati samaha sarve bhuteshu mad bhaktim labhate param. That the person that becomes Brahma bhuta, Brahma roop, mad bhaktim labhate param, that person can ultimately reach my bhakti. Eligibility through purity. If you want to go to the moon, you need to become eligible. You have to go through years of astronaut training, and then you have the qualities and you qualify to reach the moon. That is why Aksharup is so important. So what does it mean to be Aksharup? Aksharup means to imbibe the qualities of Akshar. First of all, think like Akshar. Even during difficult times, can we go through the ups and downs of life and remain stable in our moods? Ultimately, becoming Aksharup is the ultimate shield to protect us from the ups and downs of life. So the second concept of becoming Aksharup is to live like Akshar. How does Akshar live in life? If we were to sum up his life, of the whole Gunatit Parampara's life, we could say that for them, nothing in life is as dear as Bhagwan. That is the very basic, fundamental concept of life for them. In 2013, Pramukh Swami Maharaj was in Sarampur, and during the last years of his life, his health wasn't very good. We all have had his darshan. But in those days, it just so happened that his pulse was very irregular and he wasn't very well. But he wanted to go to the mandir for darshan. The doctors ultimately told Pramukh Swami Maharaj that, Swami, you cannot go for darshan, your health isn't very good, your pulse is irregular, it's not very safe. Pramukh Swami Maharaj insisted that I want to go to have darshan of Bhagwan. He told the Kothari of the Sarampur temple, Gnanhil Swami, that please ask the doctors to let me go. When the meal came to him, he refused to eat like a small child, saying that I want to go to have darshan of Bhagwan. Vivek Sagar Swami tried to convince him that, Swami, it's not safe for you to go to have darshan. You've already done darshan. Sadhus also tried to make an excuse that, Swami, Thakurji has gone to sleep, the doors are closed. But after repeated insistence, Pramukh Swami Maharaj says, I want to go, and ultimately they took him for darshan in the evening time. He wanted to go for darshan, despite the fact that in the morning he had already done his puja, and he had had the darshan of Bhagwan's darshan in his puja. He had the darshan of Hari Krishna Maharaj in his room. That was Bhagwan's darshan. He had darshan every single day before that. And yet for that one day, he also wanted to make sure that every single day of my life doesn't go without darshan. That is living like Akshar. That is what Aksharup means, to think like Akshar and to live like Akshar. But the second concept is even more important, that eligibility is not enough. You also have to do more, because eligibility is not the course, it is only opening the gate to the course. Putting on armor is not the same thing as winning the war. Bathing and putting on clean clothes does not mean that we have actually done bhakti. So, pinnacle of purity, but also worshipping at the feet of Bhagwan. Das Bhave Bhakti, that's the other part of what Mahant Swami Maharaj is telling us that we need to do in life. The aim of life is not just becoming Aksharup. It is becoming Aksharup and then worshipping at the feet of Bhagwan. Das Bhave Bhakti Kari is the other half. So Pramukh Swami Maharaj was once in Nadyad, and the youth of the Chhatralaya had done a very nice program in which they asked very poetically through a song and a dance that A Chando puche che, A Suraj puche che, ke Pramukh Swami kaun che? Pramukh Swami su che? And so after the dance was done, Pramukh Swami Maharaj got the microphone for giving blessings. And the very first sentence that he said in the blessings was, these children and these youth just ask Pramukh Swami su che? So he said, Hu tamne kau Pramukh Swami su che? He didn't answer by saying that Pramukh Swami Maharaj is the guru of millions of people throughout the world. He didn't answer by saying that Pramukh Swami Maharaj is the creator of Akshardhams. He didn't answer by saying that Pramukh Swami Maharaj is the inspirer of thousands of people's lives and transformations. He didn't answer in any of those manner. He ultimately said that Pramukh Swami Maharaj is a sadhu, Pramukh Swami Maharaj is a bhakta of Sriji Maharaj, and Pramukh Swami Maharaj is a disciple of Shastriji Maharaj and Yogiji Maharaj. Das Bhave Bhakti. And that is why this stress on Akshar and Purushottam. If you think about it, everything the Sanstha stands for, everything that the Guru Parampara stands for, everything that Sriji Maharaj has mentioned in the Vacharamrut and Gunaditananda Swami has mentioned in the Swami Nivato, everything that Bhagaji Maharaj did for Gunaditananda Swami, everything that Shastriji Maharaj did by building the mandirs that he did, everything that Yogiji Maharaj did by doing Katha Varta and Pramukh Swami Maharaj doing by spreading satsang throughout the entire world, and everything Mahant Swami Maharaj is doing today by writing Satsang Diksha and other books, is ultimately for this concept of Akshar and Purushottam. Why do we wear the kanthi with two strands? In verse number 21, Mahant Swami Maharaj reminds us that our country has two strands because of Akshar and Purushottam. That is what this entire organization stands for. That is why we have murtis in the very central khand of all our mandirs of Akshar and Purushottam. So the second question that we answered through Satsang Diksha is very important. Why are we here? We are here to become Aksharup and to do bhakti to Bhagwan. That is the second question we need to navigate through spirituality. So now that we know who we are and why we're here, the third question that we must answer to navigate through spirituality is, how do I get there? How do I reach where I'm supposed to be reaching? How do I get to that sthiti, that level of Aksharup? And so Mahant Swami Maharaj has given very simple answers in a very clear manner through Satsang Diksha. In verse number 5, Mahant Swami Maharaj writes very simply, Sarvam idam hi satsangat labhyate. Everything that we have to achieve in the spiritual realm can be achieved through satsang. What is satsang? So Mahant Swami Maharaj writes in very clear terms in verse number 8, Satyasya svatmanah sangha, Satyasya paramatmanah, Satyasya cha guroho sangha, Satchastranam tathevacha. That what is satsang? In very simple terms, satsang is simply keeping the company of Shatsastra, keeping the company of Atma, and keeping the company of Paramatma. But most importantly, Mahant Swami Maharaj mentions, satsang means keeping the company of the Guru. And he writes in Satsang Diksha again that without the Guru, there is no way we'll understand ourselves, no way will we understand Bhagwan, and there's no way we can progress in the spiritual realm. In verse number 22, Mahant Swami Maharaj says very clearly, without satsang, without knowing the Guru and keeping the company of a Guru, Mahant Swami Maharaj says there is no possibilities of attaining Brahm Vidya and there is no Sakshatkar. In verse number 23, Mahant Swami Maharaj says that without a Guru, there is no Nirvikalpa Nischay and there is no Brahma Bhava. In verse number 24, Mahant Swami Maharaj says that without a Guru, there is no Bhakti and there is no Param Anand, there is no bliss or happiness. The exact same sentiments have been echoed by Bhagavan Swaminarayan in Vartal 11. Sriji Maharaj says in Vartal 11 that Sat Purushne Vishe Dhrad Priti, એ જ આત્મદર્શનનું સાધન છે, એ જ ભગવાનના મહિમા જાણવાનું સાધન છે અને એ જ ભગવાનના સાક્ષાત્કાર દર્શન થયાનું સાધન છે. એ જ, that is the only way that we can progress in the spiritual realm. The exact same concept has been repeated throughout all the things that we have done in satsang. The Guru is inevitable for us to progress in the spiritual realm. In Delhi Akshardham, there are many different things that we have done to depict the life of Bhagavan Swaminarayan and his messages. And in the IMAX story, we have a very nice story of all of Nilkant Varni's travels and everything he did throughout his travels. But if we were to sum up the essence of everything Bhagavan Swaminarayan stood for, there is a very simple dialogue between Nilkant Varni and a pujari. And in the dialogue, Nilkant Varni explains to the pujari very simply, and the pujari asks the question to Nilkant Varni that iron sinks and wood floats. So what can iron do to float? And Nilkant Varni answers in very simple terms that the only way iron can float is for it to cling to wood. The analogy applies to us in the same way in the spiritual world. We are bound to sink in Maya because that is the nature of the Jeev. To float, ultimately we need to cling to a Guru, but that's not the end. Because if you think about it, this book that Mahant Swami Maharaj has written is called not just Satsang, it is called Satsang Diksha, meaning just having satsang is not enough. We need to actually move towards satsang and actually do satsang. And that is exactly the definition that Mahant Swami Maharaj has given for the word Diksha, and why he's included that Diksha word in the book itself. In verse number 10, Mahant Swami Maharaj writes, Diksheti Dhrada Sankalpaha. That what is Diksha? It is Dhrad Sankalp. Meaning, not only do we have to understand the importance of satsang and talk about it, ultimately we have to do it and we have to start moving on the path. And so Mahant Swami Maharaj writes that Diksha is actually a combination of many different things. Diksha is firm resolve. Diksha is loving faith. Diksha also is unshakable conviction. Diksha is total commitment. Diksha is having a strong will, and ultimately Diksha is also having absolute refuge in Bhagavan and the Guru. So all of this may seem very difficult to walk on the spiritual path, to understand the Atma, to become Brahmrup, to do satsang. It is all difficult sometimes. But ultimately Mahant Swami Maharaj has also mentioned through the Satsang Diksha book itself that because we have the prapti of Bhagavan, we have the prapti of satsang, that we can always use that strength to progress on the spiritual path. Because ultimately we have to understand that the force behind us is much, much stronger than the task that is ahead of us. Shri Swami Narayan Bhagwan Jai.
In today's Sabha, we learned about the three main questions that exist within our relationship with ourselves. Who am I? Where am I supposed to go? How do I get there? We learned that we are not this body, but the soul within it. We want to become Aksharup and do Purushottamni Bhakti. This whole process begins with Antardrashti.